Hi, this is Chris Young. Welcome to episode 83 of Contemplating Life. This is the third in a multi-part series inspired by the hit movie musical Wicked Part 1. In this series, we'll explore my relationship with musical theater, fairy tales, and fantasy in general. Now, in our last episode, we talked about how my mother introduced me to the joys of musical theater and show tunes. So in that context, set your Wayback Machine for February 22nd, 1965. I was 9 years old on the night that CBS aired a musical special titled Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. The Cinderella story has many variations throughout many cultures. The earliest known variant is the story of Rhodopis, recounted by the Greek geographer Strabo sometime between the years 7 BCE and 23 CE. It's about a Greek slave girl who marries the king of Egypt. The story as we know it today, with the fairy godmother and the glass slipper, was written in French by Charles Perrault in 1697. The French title is
Cendrillon ou la petite pantoufle de verre.
In English, that is Cinderella or the Little Glass Slipper. See the linked Wikipedia article for more information about various versions of the story throughout many cultures. The Rodgers and Hammerstein musical adaptation of the classic fairy tale had been written specifically for television and not the Broadway stage. And until I began researching this podcast, I thought the 1965 version was the original. However, my research uncovered the original version was shown live on March 31st, 1957, and starred Julie Andrews. Until days ago, I had no idea it existed. The 1957 version was broadcast in the Eastern, Central, and Mountain Time zones, live in color and in black and white. A black and white tape version was shown in the Pacific Time zone. It was never re-aired. Now, although the soundtrack album was released the day after the program aired, it was thought that all the video recordings had been lost. However, in 2002, a black and white kinescope of the March 17 full dress rehearsal was rediscovered. It was restored and issued to DVD. It was also shown on PBS in December 2004 as part of their Great Performances series. It features a 2002 introduction by Julie Andrews and is available for free on YouTube, a link provided in the description. I highly recommend watching at least that introduction and a few minutes of the show just to see Andrews' performance. There's also a linked Wikipedia article covering the musical's complete history with all its various incarnations. But let's get back to the version in question, the 1965 version that I saw as a child. This version introduced Leslie Ann Warren in the title role. It also starred Walter Pidgeon as the king, Ginger Rogers as the queen, and Celeste Holm as the fairy godmother. In one of the early scenes, Cinderella sits alone by the fireplace on a small wooden chair and sings. Here's Leslie Ann Warren.
In my own little corner, in my own little chair, I can be whatever I want to be. On the wings of my fancy, I can fly anywhere, and the world will open its arms to me.
She then describes all the wondrous things she imagines she might do if she could travel the world to exotic locations and have great adventures. As a 9-year-old kid with a vivid imagination and appreciation of Broadway music, a science fiction fan, sitting there in a wheelchair, this sad little ballad moved me more than any music I had heard in my young life. I knew what it was like to sit in my own little corner, in my own little chair, and dream about impossible things. Did I say impossible? Remember that word while I further set the context of the times. The United States had recently concluded Project Mercury, which consisted of 2 suborbital and 4 orbital missions that sent American men into space for the first time. A young, charismatic president had committed us to land a man on the moon by the end of the decade in a race against the Soviet Union. Project Gemini would put a 2-man capsule into space the following month. An optimism that Project Apollo would succeed in the lunar goal by the decade's end was quite high. Live television signals were routinely being transmitted around the world via satellite, and the computer revolution was already underway, even though I didn't know the details. For example, in 1965, we had the introduction of the first mini-computer, the PDP-8. Lawrence Roberts connected 2 computers over a telephone line to create ARPANET, the precursor to the modern Internet. In short, the word impossible was being erased from the English language. Furthermore, I was reading books like Tom Swift and His Rocket Ship and Danny Dunn and Anti-Gravity Paint, my first science fiction stories. Unlike the alleged purveyors of infallible truth, known as the Holy Roman Catholic Church, under which I had been indoctrinated, I was discovering that scientists were more adept at answering my difficult questions to my satisfaction. So in that context, in the next scene, Cinderella's fairy godmother arrives to grant the young maiden her heart's desire. She'll get to go to the ball and meet the handsome prince. But when Cinderella protests that such dreams are impossible, the fairy godmother sings the following song. Here's Celeste Holm from the 1965 version.
Dear fairy godmother, it all seems so impossible.
Impossible for a plain yellow pumpkin to become a golden carriage. Impossible for a plain country bumpkin and a prince to join in marriage. And 4 white mice will never be 4 white horses. Such fol-de-rol and fiddle-dee-dee, of course, is impossible. But the world is full of zanies and fools who don't believe in sensible rules and won't believe what sensible people say. And because these daft and dewy-eyed dopes keep building up impossible hopes, impossible things are happening every day.
After the fairy godmother works her magic and they are en route to the ball, they reprise the song. But this time, the word impossible is replaced by it's possible. Now, I'm not sure if it's ironic or hypocritical that someone like me, who considers himself so rational and so scientific, could be enchanted by a fairy tale that makes fun of sensible people. Although the story entirely depends on supernatural forces, at its core, Cinderella is about being a dreamer and not setting artificial limits on what one can achieve. As a disabled person, I already live with significant limits. It's counterproductive for me to impose additional artificial limits of expectations. Dreamers who see unlimited possibilities are not incompatible with rational scientific exploration. In fact, they are the core of scientific pursuits. Scientists are dreamers too. Renowned science fiction author and futurist Arthur C. Clarke is known for a trio of axioms in which he discusses the impossible. These have come to be known as Clarke's 3 laws. They are: 1. When a distinguished but elderly scientist states that something is possible, he's almost certainly right. And when he states that something is impossible, he is very probably wrong. Number 2, the only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture a little way past them into the impossible. And number 3, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. While watching Cinderella and her fairy godmother mock the word impossible, I believed in the magic of science and technology. Impossible things were indeed happening every day in my life. Case in point, a few weeks later, I would be given my first motorized wheelchair. This amazing piece of technology meant that my own little chair was no longer stuck in my own little corner. The idea that I could roam my neighborhood to play with my friends, rather than being dependent upon them to come to me, seemed like an impossible dream. Perhaps that's why it's one of my favorite songs to play on the organ, like I described last episode. Now let's talk for a moment about the genius talent of lyricist Oscar Hammerstein II. Can we talk about the brilliance of rhyming the words "of course is" with horses? Simply amazing. Wikipedia reports that this version of Cinderella was shown 8 times between 1965 and 1974. I must have seen most of those re-airings because I learned many of these songs inside out, and I don't think I could have done that with just one viewing. And I didn't purchase a VHS copy until many, many years later. Of special interest to me were the love songs between the prince and Cinderella at the ball. These songs were significant to me throughout the puppy love romance with Rose Schumann that I had from 1967 through 1974. In the song 10 minutes ago, the prince and Cinderella sing of the joys of love at first sight. Here are Stuart Damon as the prince and Lesley-Ann Warren as Cinderella.
10 minutes ago I saw you. I looked up when you came through the door. My head started reeling. You gave me the feeling the room had no ceiling or floor. 10 minutes ago I met you, and we murmured our how do you do's. I wanted to ring out the bells and fling out my arms and to sing out the news. I have found her, she's an angel with the dust of the stars in her eyes. We are dancing, we are flying, and she's taking me back to the skies. I may never come down to earth again.
Now, those of you who have heard episode 19 of this podcast know how smitten I was at first sight by that blonde-haired, blue-eyed 12-year-old beauty, Rosie, in 7th grade. That irrational enthusiasm for a beautiful, total stranger is embodied in that song. Later at the ball, Hammerstein again illustrates his brilliance as a lyricist when Cinderella and the prince ask one of the most profound questions about romantic relationships that you'll ever find in musical theater, or anywhere else for that matter. Here are Stuart Damon as the prince and Lesley-Ann Warren as Cinderella, singing "Do I Love You Because You're Beautiful" from the 1965 version.
Do I love you because you're beautiful, or are you beautiful because I love you? Am I see in you a girl too lovely to be really true.
Do I want you because you're wonderful? Or are you wonderful because I want you?
Are you the sweet invention of a lover's dream? Or are you really as wonderful as you seem?
That musical question has haunted me about my relationship with every woman I've ever loved. Let's refer again to one of my favorite science fiction authors, Arthur C. Clarke, who provides his own take on the question. Now, Clarke is more known for his hard science fiction stories, yet on this one occasion, he waxes philosophical and makes a brilliant observation about loving relationships. In his 1951 story, The Road to the Sea, he says, "The person one loves never really exists, but is a projection focused through the lens of the mind onto whatever screen it fits with least distortion." This entire topic of the tension between reality and perception is one that we will probably explore in future episodes. Before we wrap this up, I should note that the musical was also remade in 1997, starring pop singer Brandy in the title role. It featured Whitney Houston as the fairy godmother, Bernadette Peters as the stepmother, Whoopi Goldberg as the queen, and Victor Garber as the king. Despite this all-star cast of some of my favorite performers, this version didn't appeal to me the way the 1965 version did. I think I have so many nostalgic feelings about the 65 version that the remake didn't meet my expectations. This entire discussion of Cinderella is just another example of how fantasy, musicals, and fairy tales provide us with rich inspiration as we continue contemplating life. In our next episode, we'll take our first journey to Oz, courtesy of the 1938 classic film The Wizard of Oz. Only with that background and context can we appreciate the 2024 musical film Wicked Part 1 and its origin story of the alleged Wicked Witch Elphaba. If you find this podcast educational, entertaining, enlightening, or even inspiring, consider sponsoring me on Patreon for just $5 per month. You'll get early access and other exclusive content. I'm not in it for the money, but every bit helps. As always, my deepest thanks to my financial supporters. That means more to me than I can ever express. And if you can't provide financial support, post a link and share the stories on social media. I just want to grow my audience. All of my back episodes are available, and please leave comments or questions or feedback of any kind where you found the podcast. I'll see you next time as we continue contemplating life. Until then, fly safe, everyone.